Hello and welcome to Team GB's In Conversation With for Mental Health Awareness Week. Today we've got episode 2 of a 3-part series focused on mental health, and all the episodes, of course, will be available on Team GB's YouTube channel. So please subscribe, comment, like, share, and enjoy with everyone in your network. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Rugby Sevens player Alex Davis. Alex was part of a 12-man travelling team to the Olympics, but was unfortunately ruled out with injury. Alex is part of the English Rugby Sevens team, and very enviously, he tours the world as part of the HSBC World Series Tour. So welcome, Alex.
Morning, Callum. Thanks very much for having me. Pretty proud of that intro. Yeah, I think a lot of people are pretty envious of our travel diary. So yeah, it's a good one.
No, for sure. And this is where I'm going to fanboy for a little bit, because when I was growing up, I kind of had the choice between rugby and cycling. And on reflection, maybe I made the wrong choice because, seeing you guys walk around as a pack at Rio 2016, I was kind of like, I'd like to be part of that.
A bit of a stronghold when we come together. Obviously, 12 relatively large blokes just walking around together. I think for some people can be a bit intimidating, but yeah, we love our sevens. It's great sport, and now that it's in the Olympics, it's even better.
I want to talk about kind of rugby as a community and as a sport to kick off with, because I think it's quite important when we talk about your story later on. Because one of the things that I find amazing about rugby is that it's got such an amazing community and a kind of teammate mentality. I've been fortunate enough to be involved with like the Tommy Smith testimonial, a few bits with Doddy Weir. It seems like there's a really kind of huge community that pulls together when people from anywhere in the sport face a kind of hardship, and then even when it comes to like societal issues, it seems like rugby is a kind of step ahead of a lot of other sports. I think you've got some incredible assets in the sport like Nigel Owens, Gareth Thomas, really breaking down barriers when it comes to LGBT issues, although Israel Folau has done his bit to try and knock that back a few steps. But given that background, it's kind of quite easy to presume that you were always quite well supported within that team. It always seems like a situation that's got each other's back. But what I'm really interested in is like when you first started to face kind of hardship or any kind of issue, you actually find it a little bit difficult to open up to your teammates.
Yeah, I think those are very good observations. Obviously, rugby has always prided itself on its like characteristics, its traits, all those sorts of things, and how it's a team sport, and there's a lot of honesty, there's a lot of respect in the game between opponents and things like that. And it's clear to see when people play a rugby match, obviously they leave everything out there on the pitch, and then afterwards we'll have a beer with their opposite man in the clubhouse afterwards, and you can see the opposition fans sat next to each other and having a laugh, despite their team maybe losing by 20, 30 points. It's not like some other sports where you can't be mixing with the opposite crowd. But yeah, I think that's a great thing about rugby, and one thing that I guess has always appealed to me and something that I love. And I guess that maybe that's why it's benefited from this kind of this new attention around mental health, because obviously rugby has always been admired as this having these brave athletes that play it, and so I think maybe that's then fed on to the players wanting to show their braveness in off the pitch by opening up and being vulnerable. But that's not to say obviously that comes with its hardship still, and rugby has always been, and still probably to this day, it has its stigmas, like quite a macho environment, and obviously it's all about being tough and riding with the hard times and putting a brave face on when you get injured or when you take a hard knock, particularly on the pitch. And so I think that does feed into making opening up about hard issues tough. So for me, it was definitely my experience with mental health and rugby has definitely been a process. But I think what you spoke about in terms of the community spirit of rugby was something that I benefited from throughout. I have benefited from throughout this process. These traits and these, got a bit lost there, but.
No, I think it's something that we always try to copy in the British cycling team, because we're fundamentally an individual sport, and sometimes it's often seen as like the hardest competition you might face is to pull that Team GB jersey on your back in the first place, and then everything kind of falls into place more or less by the time you get to the Olympic Games. But for you guys, it always seemed like there was something different. There's that mentality about kind of like leaving the jersey in a better place, about doing your best for the team, and supporting each other through that.
I think that's quite a good point, because like you say, leaving the jersey in a better place. Obviously, people often talk about when especially in rugby team, when you're wearing. So, for instance, when I first wore the England rugby shirt, I think on my debut for England Sevens, I got a written email from Matthew Tate, who used to obviously play Sevens and rugby, 15-a-side rugby for England. And for me, that was all about kind of the legacy that was before me, and hopefully that I would be continuing in terms of that shirt that I was about to pull on. And that shows that family spirit of rugby, which maybe you don't get quite so much in an individual sport. I've never experienced an individual sport, but that's certainly something throughout every team I've played in rugby. The kind of history of that shirt you're wearing is clear to see, and people speak about it a lot. It's unique, I guess, because it's especially as rugby has been in it for such a short time now. I think when it was first highlighted that rugby sevens was going to be involved in the Olympic cycle, it suddenly just grew up another level, because obviously everyone, no matter what your kind of favourite sport was growing up as a kid, like you just idolised the Olympics and the athletes that competed in it, no matter what sport they were competing in. And so to be involved in that Team GB network, that family, and have that common ground with other athletes like yourself, the people that have competed for Team GB before us, like Chris Hoy, Mo Farah, anyone like that, is just it's definitely a network of people that you're like, wow, this is really something special, rather than even bigger than just your nation for rugby. As much as we're proud of that and will always be, because that's what got us to this stage. Now being involved in a United Kingdom effort on a national front is pretty awesome.
Now, kind of given that kind of community spirit that exists within rugby, I'd kind of like to try and bring up a really unfortunate time for you, and I'm sure your family, which was, when you were out in Dubai, and it was told to you, you got a kind of fateful phone call where you said your dad's essentially had a week to live with terminal cancer. First of all, we got sincerest sympathies with that. I think that's a phone call that everyone dreads. But that seemed to, from your experiences of that, it seems like it kind of really went away from that community spirit and more into just like a firefighting mode, I guess. It was like, I'm faced with this incredible hardship, and I just need to deal with that as best I can, and sport can wait. Was that kind of the situation you were faced with?
Yeah, definitely. I think naturally the empathy and compassion from people kicked in, like around my support network with teammates and management. But for me, it was complete fight or flight. I'd never experienced, fortunately, me and my family had never experienced kind of grief of a close family member before. So for us, it was a very new experience that we weren't really sure kind of how to act. Obviously, there is no right or wrong way, but I think your natural instincts just kick in, and you're just like, right, this is what I need to do. Whether at the time it's probably the right or the wrong reason, you just kick into kind of airplane mode and just crack on. There's not really two ways about it. I wasn't sure where to turn, who to speak to. I just thought, right, this is the next step. This is how I'm going to deal with it. And cracked on. Obviously, it was, like you say, it's one of those phone calls you never dream of receiving. But it was and it completely knocked me for six. But I had this decision to make, was like, right, do I just basically crumble and fall away, or return home, or do I just crack on and try and throw myself into sport? And I've reflected on the process quite a lot, but it was a very interesting, challenging time back in when was it, November 2015 now, so quite a while ago.
And how did that kind of impact the way that people saw you and treated you within that team? Because I think, to draw a slight comparison, when I was 18 years old, I was misdiagnosed with lymphoma, and that was a kind of news that, understandably, I guess, spread like wildfire throughout the team.
Yeah,
and it was almost as if that single event kind of changed things forever, because I went from having mates and being laughy and jokey to a lot of them not really knowing what to say. Not, you could see it in their eyes that they wanted to offer support, but they just didn't know how. I think one of the anecdotes I like to say is, like, I kind of felt like I was the Walking Dead. I mean, it turned out to be a misdiagnosis. But even if I had that diagnosis, I had a 99% chance of survival. But regardless, that it seemed like that atmosphere changed instantly and made it almost harder to deal with that issue at the time. How did your teammates react to that news? I guess they were in the same situation. They wanted to help, but given it's such a massive issue, how did it end up?
Obviously, I think when people hear the word cancer, like, you automatically think the worst. Obviously, there's such a high rate of a number of people that are going to be diagnosed with cancer in their lifetime, and I think automatically, regardless of the diagnosis or how severe or aggressive your cancer may be, people will think, well, like, there's a high percentage chance that you're going to die from this. And obviously that's really hard for anyone to hear, regardless of your relationship with that person. Obviously you often see adverts and campaigns on TV where they're trying to appeal to people to give money, and they obviously telling you stories of people that have lived with cancer, and it breaks your heart to watch it, even though you don't know the person, because you can just, especially for me now, having experienced it, you can see the real effect it has in the family. But going back to what you said about the kind of the support from the team, definitely there was an air of, when I kind of returned to training, having taken some time away, that I guess people wanted to try and be as normal as possible with me, because they didn't want to, they were probably conscious of upsetting me, worried about kind of the stability of my own emotions, saying the wrong thing. And so often, to try and not say the wrong thing, they would just try and be as normal as possible, as if nothing had happened, which is no fault of anyone's. Like, I think if the situation had been somebody else, I probably would have been susceptible to that as well, because having not experienced such a traumatic event, like, I'd never come across death before, really. Like, I'd had grandparents die when I was very young, but that was at a time of my life when I probably didn't really understand what was going on, so it wasn't really, I couldn't really process it. Whereas maybe sort of 3 or 4 years ago, when I was like early 20s, I probably would have been a bit awkward around the subject, and I think that's where people, I guess that's their default reaction, is just to be like, "Oh, how's it going, mate? Good to see you." And I mean, I could definitely tell that there was sympathy there, and people wanted to care for me, make sure I was all right, arm around my shoulder, that sort of thing. But yeah, it was a tricky kind of atmosphere, I guess, for everyone, because there was this person coming back in, myself, who had just witnessed his father die, and he was trying to get back into rugby, where obviously everyone's focus, despite my difficulties, is performance. And so it's a really difficult thing to manage as a group, especially when the sporting kind of atmosphere of any team or individuals is kind of fun and laughter. Obviously, that's what gets sport going. It's a key part of sport. So that's where people naturally go to if they're a bit kind of unsure as to how to behave.
And did you feel in a way that I kind of switch because I've been in a team environment, and like the banter levels are pretty high. Everyone's quite cutthroat with that kind of thing, and that can actually be, if it goes too far, obviously it can verge on bullying. But if it's just at the right balance, it's a great coping strategy, especially if you've had like a bad result or something going on in your life. It's a great way to tear down that kind of atmosphere within the team, and get each other on a similar level. But when it's kind of switched to that kind of small talk, kind of tiptoey kind of atmosphere, in a way, did you feel as if that kind of hampered overcoming that time of your life even more?
That banter atmosphere was actually, I remember it being quite comforting, because in a way, them being normal with me was helpful, because it just made me feel more relaxed, and I guess maybe I was scared about people asking questions and trying to emotionally open up to me and show their own vulnerabilities. For me, was quite scary, because then I felt that I would just break down. So for me, that banter and that very normal was helpful, because it just made me feel at ease with everything that was going on, and just getting back into the environment. Like, there's always certain guys in the team that are willing to crack jokes and poke you in places and say things that will get you fighting back. But although it was comforting, it didn't help me. Because it meant I think I very quickly just switched into the mode that I would if I was just going into training, which meant that I wasn't acknowledging the actual deeper feelings and emotions that I was having, and confusing feelings as being like, oh, it's a week after my dad's death and I'm back in the training environment because I need to get back into training. So yeah, I guess despite it being something that at the time felt good and felt like warming, definitely wasn't something that I would probably like to experience again, because I know that was kind of almost a catalyst for then the further sort of mental health difficulties I faced further down the line.
It kind of sounds a little bit that you started to kind of isolate yourself from that support network, and you started to kind of close up a little bit. And then, as you touched on later, that's when it started to kind of deteriorate for you in a personal context. Are you able to talk through that a little bit, and maybe on how that was a sticking plaster and how it kind of ended up sinking a little bit?
Yeah. Well, I mean, so that was only the start of my second year in the sevens program. So I was a year in, out of university. And that was my first real taste of like a professional rugby environment. So it was all quite new to me. I was still sort of finding my feet. I wasn't, I guess, particularly well established in terms of selection in the team. I wasn't like a regular, but I felt like I still had good relationships with other guys in the squad. And Simon Amor, who was our head coach, who still is head coach, drove down to Bristol, which is where me and my family lived at the time, or still live, sorry. And he sort of wanted to reach out to us and show that obviously the team were thinking of us, and basically just ensure that I could take as much time as I wanted. And then, yeah, I decided to get back into, basically throw myself back into rugby, which was a good thing, a bad thing. It was great because it was a natural distraction. It was obviously a massive passion of mine, and something that me and my dad shared as well, because he coached me up until the age of 17. So he was a huge lover of rugby also. So for me, it felt right to do that. Probably wasn't the right thing to do, but like you said earlier, sport doesn't really wait around for you. So I was kind of in this difficult position where I wanted to sort of acknowledge my feelings and address them and grieve. But also I knew that in 6 months' time, rugby sevens was going to be debuting on the Olympic stage. And for me, that was like an opportunity that I didn't want to miss. And I knew wouldn't wait around for me. Like, I had to be in training. I had to be competing to show that I was worth to go to the Olympics. And it was tough. So literally 2 months after, we went to Sydney to play in Sydney Sevens, where I experienced kind of my first major injury in rugby. Like, I had to fly home from Sydney, had ankle surgery there. So that didn't help kind of the grieving process, because then I was thrown into an intense rehab block for sort of 12 weeks, rehab my ankle, where, as I'm sure you know, it's pretty tireless exercise, not just on the body, but also on the brain, in terms of ups and downs, those tough days when you don't really want to be doing the ankle circuit that you've been doing for the last 6 weeks for like the 10th time that day. And then, so that's just as hard work to throw yourself into that. So I didn't, I guess all my energy was being focused around that rehab. And then also thinking about, right, how am I going to get back fit for selection for Team GB? And then those were all good distractions, but also they were, I was kind of being a bit foolish, I guess, in terms of not realizing that the damage that they were causing in terms of my suffering for the grief of my dad. And like you said, I was kind of just bottling things up. I wasn't being open enough to myself. I wasn't being open enough to my teammates, even my family. Like, I was just so solely focused on, I guess, being a sportsman again and being a rugby player, that I lost I don't know what I'm trying to say. I guess I just lost all direction in terms of life away from rugby. Even though rugby was actually going brilliantly well, my rehab was going well, I was on track to go to the Olympics. Everything else outside of that, although it wasn't visible to anyone, I guess I was just inside, I was just suffering, because I had all these things building up: rehab, Olympics, death of my father, obviously on top of all of that, and then the natural kind of stigma around just being a bit of a bloke and not speaking about my feelings was above all just suffocating me, basically. I've done a lot of work with our team psychologist since then, and obviously I've spoken more with my mum, my sister about, and my dad's sister, in fact, about kind of my own behaviours and how we as a family can be better in terms of sharing our feelings. And we've recognised that my dad, actually, when he was a young guy, and because he lost his father died when he was 19, so quite a similar experience to myself, and his natural instinct was like kind of escapism. He decided to like just sort of run away to Africa for a few years and went and lived there, and so those kind of behaviours were, I guess, passed on to me. And because he grew up loving rugby, especially in a time of life where men didn't speak about their feelings, you just put a brave face on. So I naturally took on those similar characteristics, and so definitely when I was, I guess, given the choice of getting back into rugby, I was just like, yeah, I have to do it. That feels right. I think that the opportunity, from what I can remember, was given to me in terms of taking time off. Simon was like, look, take as much time as you need. Obviously they said to me, look, we want to take you out to some of the tournaments, but if you don't feel like you're ready, then we're not going to put any pressure on you. But I was very conscious of time running away from me, and also sport. And I think that was probably my biggest worry, was like, oh, sport's going to leave me behind. And because it was something that I was so driven by for most of my life, to be a professional rugby player, I was just, that felt like my coping mechanism, just to get back in it. And it was very, very manly, just to be like, brave face, crack on, rugby, sport. And so that was natural for me.
And it sounded like that kind of temporary fix started to kind of lose its effectiveness, I guess, a little bit, because about 6 months after that, you were considering retirement. And I can totally identify with that need to push on, and that when I suffered from depression, I was quite, I guess, almost open to the fact that I didn't want to actually accept it as being an issue or having anything wrong or an illness or anything like that. I just wanted to keep on pushing, because as you said, the pressure of taking a step back, you kind of think, well, if I take a month off to kind of deal with the emotions and the feelings that I'm going through, I'm going to be 6 months behind the other guys by the time I get back up. So it's a really tricky place, but it sounds like that kind of sticking plaster in essence kind of fell off quite quick for you. With 6 months down the line, you were thinking, I can't keep doing this.
Yeah, yeah. Well, obviously having experienced the death of my father, then injury, and then the process of Olympic selection, got to Rio, and then 2 days before competition started, I dislocated my ankle and missed out on competing in the games. And then the team went on to win a silver medal whilst I was at home in Bristol recovering from surgery. I was just like, wow, when will this end? I mean, I guess having reflected on it, I was grateful for the experience with my dad, because that then did help me get over the Rio process quicker, because I was just like, well, obviously there's bigger and worse things that can happen in life than missing out on an Olympic experience. I mean, obviously I was absolutely devastated at the time, but it did help me, so I was grateful for that in a way. But I then obviously went into another period of rehab. So like in the space of kind of 8 to 10 months, I'd had 2 ankle surgeries and experienced the death of my father and missed out on Olympic Games. So it's just like completely blown away by these quite dramatic and sudden events. And yeah, my love for rugby was just deteriorating. And I think, like you're saying, it was short-term fix. So obviously, like training, when you're on the bike for yourself or you're out running on the pitch, you just think, right, the more I do this, I'll get fitter, I'll get stronger, and like kind of my weaknesses will go away. And I guess that was maybe my approach to the mental health as well. Like, right, the more I kind of ignore this, bottle it up, it will just sort itself out, which is obviously just a terrible mindset to have. But that for me seemed to be the right way forward. And that's when it just started to boil away, chip away at me from the inside out, and my love for rugby just started to crumble. I wasn't enjoying being in training. I say that I was enjoying the actual training sessions. Well, I feel like I was, but as soon as rugby finished and training was over, I was just keen to get out of the environment. I didn't want to be there. I wanted to go home. My kind of motivation was very low in terms of stuff outside of rugby. Like, I had no interest in socializing with my friends, really doing much else than kind of doing training, going home, sitting on the sofa and being a bit of a slob, I guess if you want to call it that. And I was very kind of, what's the word? I was kind of, and people, I think people could recognize that I had got into this kind of quite dangerous cycle of behaviors, and I was against the fact that I was looking like this or I was behaving like this. I didn't really have also much pride in my personal appearance. Like, I couldn't be bothered to get my hair cut. I was like, had a terrible beard like I do now, and those sorts of things. But people were trying to help me, but I was just really resistant to it. I didn't want the help. I think probably definitely because I was scared of what would happen if I addressed it. I was really worried about the pain, because I knew that there was all there. And if I was to process it and unpack it, then I would just basically fall apart. And I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to experience that really painful feeling of just, like, I guess, complete emotional breakdown, because I knew it was going to happen at some point, but I was doing my utmost just to ignore it.
So what was the catalyst for that first step to realise that this wasn't going to be a sustainable coping strategy, and I do actually need to unearth a lot of these pretty unpleasant and destructive feelings? Yeah,
it's an interesting point, because it takes quite a bit of courage, I would say. It's like you say, it's not an easy thing to do, and I still at times struggle with it now. And then, like you say, speaking up is obviously it's a very important action within that, but there's so much more that goes around it, like the support you have to be able to do that and things. But I guess going back to the support I had, we were very fortunate in our team that we had a lady called Katie Warrener, who was our team psychologist, and she I think she pretty much came on board around 2015, 2016. So when I was going through all of this. So she basically lived it all with me, because she was in every sort of, I don't know, 4, 6, 8 weeks for general catch-ups, and I think she was very conscious of what I was experiencing as quite a young guy, sort of 22, 23 years old. And so she was traveling this journey with me of mental health and injuries and whatnot, and could recognize the fact that I wasn't being as open as I necessarily could have been. So we were working on switch on, switch off, purely from a performance aspect, but then we would also explore off the pitch behaviors and things like that with one another. So we started to unpack my feelings, my behaviors, and it wasn't necessary. It was definitely not her giving me any answers. It was her just asking the right questions. And I think the fact that she had been there sort of from day one with me, I felt, I had a tremendous amount of trust with her, which for me is so important when you're trying to open up and speak and share your feelings, because I just knew that, like we're chatting now, I just knew it was a safe place. I knew that whatever I said to her, whatever I revealed to her, wasn't going to go any further than the two of us. And I could tell that she was asking the right questions, because every time she asked something, I would just feel this kind of like dagger in my heart, because I knew that she was seeking an answer, and she wasn't going to say anything until I opened up. And although it was painful, I benefited from it so much. So that for me, it's the trust I had with her really helped me build up my courage, because it wasn't something that just overnight I was like, okay, I can speak about this now. It was definitely a step-by-step process. And I think as I opened up more, I started to experience these feelings of relief, like they say, the weight off the shoulders, and almost a sense of enjoyment and happiness after those kind of sessions, because you're just like, God, why haven't I spoken about this sooner? Like, I feel so much better for speaking about it and just sharing. And sometimes we would just have, it would just be a very casual conversation like you and me are having now, and next thing you know, like, I'm kind of bawling my eyes out because I've shared something that I've had bottled up for the last 4 years. And so it was going through that painful experience to then see the light at the end of the tunnel, I guess, for which I hadn't been able to see for a long time. And she massively helped in that this someone else to speak to who you can trust and understand, they understand that you're going to be very vulnerable in this place where you are, and you're going to show some things that I didn't want to show. Like, I didn't want to be emotional. I didn't want someone to see me crying or hurting, which is obviously such a silly mindset to look back at it now. But I was behaving in a way that just felt right at the time. In that moment, in that period of time in my life, I was like, right, this is my natural instinct. And so that's why I portrayed those behaviors. But she was instrumental in kind of my recovery, I guess, from mental health, which is still like a journey that I'm going on and exploring, but it massively helped me. I remember we were having a conversation once, and I was rehabbing another injury with Katie, and it was quite important for me to get back fit for selection to play some more rugby, because I'd been out for quite a long period of time. And I remember sitting down with her, and it was another quite emotional session. And basically I just said to her, look, I don't, regardless of whether I get back fit or not, I don't want to play. And I said, look, is there any way we can speak to the coaches and just say, look, he's fit, he's well, or he wants to take time out. I would still be involved with the squad. I'd still be surrounded by the team. I'd still be coming in to be present for training and things like that. But I just didn't want to compete. I didn't want to train. And I said to her, look, I can't do this. I need to take time off. And I think that's when it probably really hit home for me. And yeah, I guess the management around me that, yeah, there was a really important moment to be like, right, AJ needs to address this now properly and dedicate some time and effort into it, because it's obviously causing a lot more stress and difficulty than it should be. And so it basically just allowed me more time to although I was in training, just to forget about it and not worry about being a rugby player, and just focusing on, like you said, myself as AJ, the person, the human being, and fixing quite a lot of broken parts, basically. And that was huge for me.
But given that kind of dark period and tricky period in your life, you kind of went on to find more success. Obviously, you didn't retire, picked up a bronze medal at the Commonwealth Games, silver medal at the Rugby Sevens World Cup in San Fran. Like, it seems like this kind of road to recovery has been a pretty positive one. I'm sure there's been a few speed bumps along the way, but where are you kind of sitting now?
Yeah, generally, well, it's funny you ask, because I was pretty much days away from retiring at the end of last year, in fact, because last year I had 4 surgeries, 3 on one of my shoulders. So again, I was just going through that like cyclical process of pain, injury, and rehab. So I was just like, it wasn't mainly because, well, partly it was I was just kind of fed up of being injured and frustrated with that. So I was like, oh God, I might pack this in. But also it was partly because my body just wasn't reacting to the treatment and the surgeries that I was having. Unfortunately, it was proving quite complicated. And I think, well, I basically felt like my body was failing me. But yeah, getting back to the Commonwealth Games and winning a bronze medal there was just an incredible experience. Having gone through what I did in Rio with Team GB, to stand up on the podium there and win a bronze with a lot of the guys who had won a silver in Rio was really, really special, and something that I'll remember for the rest of my life. And I guess all this this unaddressed pain that I had, or I have been experiencing, for me was almost like fuel to the fire. And I wanted to not prove. I didn't have to prove anything, in fact. But I was just like, right, this is now that I've. I guess I felt like a new person to an extent, because I didn't have this extra baggage. I didn't have this weight kind of dragging me down. I now felt it was almost like an extra arm to my performance, something that could really push me forward. Because I felt like I had obviously my rugby was something that I could take control of in terms of my skills and my performance. But if I didn't have my head in the right place when it came to pit competition time, then I guess that was something that I was missing. And so for me, it's been something that I've actually enjoyed unpacking. I've now seen the real benefits of it, and that's partly why I am trying to be a big advocate for basically positive mental health and encouraging it within our team environment, within society, rather not just in sport. Obviously, I can see like the performance benefits of it, and also, well, forget the performance benefits of it, just the life benefits of it, just living a better life and feeling like I'm no better person, but I feel better in myself. And it's not an easy process, but I definitely now feel like I am heading in the right direction towards just generally living well, and regardless of what happens on the pitch of rugby, and kind of however long that's going to go on. Like, for me, most importantly is, like you said earlier, is just being a good human and a healthy human.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I'm so happy that you feel on that point about kind of the skills that you learn through going through that process, because that's kind of one of the ways that I try and describe seeking help to people who are a bit unsure about it. I'm like, in essence, you have nothing to lose and everything to gain, because even if it doesn't help you with that immediate issue, the amount of understanding and learning that you're going to have about yourself as a person is going to be monumental compared to your average person in the street. You're suddenly going to realize, if you feel like happy, sad, angry, cross, whatever, you're going to be able to understand why you're feeling those emotions and be able to deal with it in a more appropriate way. It's almost like a kind of good step forward in life to be able to have that period in your life where you really understand why you think the things that you do. It almost fits more into like a mental well-being category instead of a mental health category.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, having said I'm trying to be an advocate for good mental health and well-being, like I now also, I see it as almost when I'm supporting other people or trying to encourage other people to speak up or share, not, it's almost, that's treatment for myself as well, because I'm still, although I'm no finished article, still got work to do. The fact that I can basically give advice from the skills, like you say, the learnings, the fact that I understand myself better and what works for me. I know that it's not necessarily what works for me will work for somebody else, but I can impart sort of knowledge that I've had or I've learned, picked up along the way. And that for me, I see as treatment as well, just being able to share and be like, well, actually, you know what, this worked for me, or this is how I felt. And that for me is also, it's not just helping that person, it's helping myself.
And I want to just pull back quickly on the time and discussions that still happen, because that's something that's going to happen with all athletes and everyone who's involved in sport. But I wanted to see if there was like a little bit of a difference between the retirement discussions that you maybe had with yourself circa 2015 and the retirement discussions you have with now. Do you feel as if you have a lot more clarity to deal with it objectively? It's not about hiding away from challenging issues. It's about kind of, is the time, like for me, given my physical state, and it's not to do with anything else that's going on.
Yeah, definitely. I think certainly I've been more kind of at peace, and it's a simpler decision. As much as I would never want to step away from rugby, because obviously I wish I could play it for the rest of my life, I know that one, my body's not going to be able to do that, and two, it's just not realistic. Like, so for me, it was a sense of clarity. I understood where I was in life. I could unpick, I could look at the whys, the reasons behind it all, and kind of the motivation. And I guess also one thing for me massively that has helped is, in comparison to sort of 2015, 2016, was that I've recognised the importance of like passions and interests outside of rugby. And I think that's where I was suffering in 2016, because I was saying, as I said earlier, like I didn't want to socialise with my friends. I didn't really want to do much else apart from go to training, get training done, go home and just kind of sit on the sofa and just veg in my own existence, basically. And whereas now I've got these passions and loves and things that I enjoy, which I did enjoy back then, but I just didn't have any interest in taking part in them. Whereas now I'm keen to I love cooking, or I love going to music gigs, things like that. And so for me, that's been really, really, really helpful in terms of, right, what if rugby finishes tomorrow, I may not have a job, but I know I've got these loves and interests and things that also motivate me outside of the world of sport, basically.
I'm glad you brought up those kind of modern day kind of points of interest, because I read something online and I think it's really interesting, because it shows how you're still looking at ways to try and boost and improve your mental well-being. But I've seen that you've got into poetry quite recently.
Into what? Sorry?
Poetry.
Oh, poetry. Yeah. I'm not a writer, I'll tell you that, but I enjoy kind of the reading of it, and obviously the fact that you can interpret the poems. Everyone can interpret a poem quite slightly differently, and also it's a bit of escapism. Like the start of lockdown, I started reading because I moved back home with Mum. I started reading like Roald Dahl books and Winnie the Pooh books, just because like that childhood escapism, that nostalgic throwback. And for me, it's been that's something that I've really enjoyed. Poetry is quite new to me. Like I'm not much of an English literate, but I've enjoyed like just something a bit new and different.
Alex, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you, and I really hope that this is going to have a really good relevance to a lot of people listening out there. I'm sure people will identify with a lot of the challenges you've been through. So thank you very much for coming on.
Cheers, Callum. Yeah, I really appreciate it. It was good to chat about a very important topic.
This has been Team GB's In Conversation for Mental Health Awareness Week. We're talking to a number of Olympians about their personal experiences with mental health and mental well-being to get an insightful understanding of the challenges of being an elite athlete. This has been episode 2 of a 3-part series focused on mental health, and all these episodes will be available on Team GB's YouTube channel. So please like, subscribe, share, comment, especially with some poetry suggestions. I think that'd be wonderful. And we'll leave it there. So thank you very much again, Alex.
Nice one. Thanks, Callum.